Welcome back. This is Todd Sylvester with the Todd Sylvester Inspires Belief Cast. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to thank our sponsor, Veracity Networks. Thank you for believing in me. I'd also like to thank Paul Cardall for this beautiful music we're listening to. He has allowed me to, he's given me permission to use one of his songs on here, and it's just fantastic. It brings a good spirit to the room. And I also want to thank all of you listeners for time and time again sharing these amazing belief casts to your family and friends. We're just blowing up, and it's growing, and it's because of you guys, but it's also because of the amazing guests we have on. And today is no different. We are joined by Lark Dean Galley. Thanks for joining us, Lark.
Thanks, Todd. I really appreciate being here.
You betcha. So she is the author of Learning to Breathe Again, Choosing to Heal After Losing a Loved One to Suicide. And we're going to really get into this book today. You know, Lark experienced a very devastating loss back in March of 2019, losing her son to suicide. He was 19 years old. His name is Christian.
Yes.
And, you know, and unfortunately, even before that, you had lost your father to suicide 5 years earlier than that. And so you've been through a lot. And I'm so excited in the sense that you're here because you said, you know, in reading up on a bunch of stuff that you've done, you know, you found your why, you found your purpose. And you want to help so many people regarding, you know, around suicide and things like that. And so you also do consulting. You have your own consulting business, correct?
Right.
And how long have you been doing that?
So that's probably been about 9 years on and off. I also own some other businesses, but in the last 20 months, they're still going, but they're kind of on the back burner.
Well, you've done, you know, a lot of coaching and counseling with a lot of high level achieving business people, and it was interesting that you have found, similar to what your son Christian was going through, that they felt unworthy to reach their goals, you know, or in other words, just they didn't feel good enough.
Right. Which is amazing because you see these people who are crushing it, they're on top of their game, and you think, oh, they can't possibly have any insecurities.
Right.
But as I'm coaching them, I'm finding out that, oh, I can't possibly accomplish this next goal because I'm not good enough, or someone is better, or I'm not the expert.
Yeah.
And it blew me away because they had already accomplished so much that we had been working on together.
Yeah.
And here they were saying, well, I can't do this next thing, which in my opinion wasn't even as hard as what they had already done.
Right. Wow. Well, you have a goal to help 100,000 people choose to stay on this planet and step into their greatness.
Yes.
I can't wait to talk about that. That is fantastic. Well, you know, why don't we start with, just tell us a little bit about you, actually. Where did you grow up, and a little bit about your family?
Okay. So I wrote about this chapter in my book, and it wasn't until I finished that I learned something about myself. You know, as you write things down, you reflect.
Right.
One is several of my my pre-readers said, I didn't know your growing up was so messed up. And my first thought was, well, I didn't think it was messed up because it was normal, right? It was normal for me.
It's what you knew, yeah.
It was what I knew. I thought, you know, that it was normal to move every year and go to a different school every year, and to have instability and not necessarily have food readily available at home, or, you know, just a father who was undiagnosed bipolar. It wasn't until he was in his 50s that they finally diagnosed what was going on. But when he was on top of things, he made everything an adventure. Right. So it always kind of felt fun as a kid, right?
Yeah, sure.
But it wasn't until I was looking back that I could realize the instability that this created in me. The other thing it helped me realize is that I tried to counterbalance my youth by the way I parented. Oh,
okay.
So due to the lack of structure in my youth, I was overstructured as a parent, to the point where my son would often call me OCD.
Okay.
Which I don't think I'm OCD. But, you know, it's one of those things where I always felt everything has a place. It needs to be in its place. We need to be clean. We need to be on time. It was very strict and regimented. Yes. My husband's 35 years in the military. So you can only imagine between the two of us, the regiments that we sort of inflicted upon our children.
Yeah, it's interesting how when we have a certain belief formed as we're younger, that we either that kind of even sets us back and we kind of close in, or we go the other direction and we overcompensate, right?
Yes, and lots of overcompensating, yes.
Yeah. So what was that like as a kid? I mean, were you a confident kid? I mean, because you know, I'm sitting here with you right now and you've got good energy about you, confidence. how was that growing up?
I think mostly I was confident. I was the oldest of 7 kids. And the thing I will say about my father is that he always, maybe not spoken, but unspoken, let me know that I could achieve anything I wanted to in life.
Right.
I just felt that growing up.
Sure.
And so even though we didn't have a lot of money, and it wasn't until I was probably junior high school, right in there, that the disparity become very clear, when I didn't have very many clothes at all to wear to school, or I was wearing what we would call high waters,
Yeah, right.
those kinds of things.
Yeah.
It just, that's when it started to come out. And when maybe friends would come over or I'd go to their house, suddenly I realized, having 9 people live in a 2-bedroom house, really small 2-bedroom house, that wasn't really normal.
Right. Yeah. Well, and it's interesting, again, what we go through kind of shapes what we do. And you've obviously learned a lot through all of these things we've talked about, and then obviously what you went through with your son. I want to kind of talk about how you got to that point where you even felt like writing a book about it, right?
Right.
So I guess, there's so much to talk about here. Why don't you just take us through? Let's talk about just your life with your son, Christian, and just how that was going, and then how you started. You didn't see maybe the signs in the beginning, but you obviously looking back and go, man, this was going on. So if you wouldn't mind, just take us through that story.
Sure. So for all those parents out there who are struggling in their relationships with their children, I struggled with my son. Like every day it was an argument. He was just very combative with me. Mm-hmm. Super sweet boy, very kind, very intellectual. Everybody else got the best of Christian, right?
Right.
Mom got the worst. And it was almost like I felt he thought I was his jailer or preventing him from doing things. And I'm just like, no, son, you need to take a shower every day. You need to bring down your dirty clothes and let's get them washed.
Yeah.
You need to take out the trash when it's full. All of these chores that may be 5 to 10 minutes a day. But you would have thought, he spent more time arguing about doing the chores than it would have taken him to do the chores. Wow. And that just the incessant arguing was so hard for me. And yet I still tried every way that I could and got professional help to try to help me in my relationship with him.
Right.
And when he was 18, getting ready to graduate from high school, I am very happy because I'm like, you're done. Right. I have fulfilled my obligation.
Yeah.
You need to pack your bags and go out there and do all the things that you think I'm stopping you from doing. I was elated. I was actually surprised at how happy I was.
Really?
I felt like I finally could see some light and get out of a jail in a sense.
Yeah.
He got a girlfriend that summer between high school and college.
Okay.
And he suddenly became very polite and very much kinder to me. And I said, you know what? Maybe we can work things out, right?
Right, yeah.
I just can't have all this arguing. And so what happened was he stepped it up a little bit with keeping his room and his areas clean, right? And I was able to slacken up a bit on the level of cleanliness that I demanded.
Yeah.
And we were able to come to this somewhat of a truce. And so he was living with us that first year of his college. And he was at the University of Utah in the mechanical engineering department. Okay. And like I said, this kid was brilliant. When he was 6 years old, he could argue with me like a seasoned attorney. Like he was right and I was wrong. And he really was right at 6. I was just like, please, son, just do it. Just don't argue.
Right.
And so he was brilliant. And he always wanted to go into this mechanical engineering. He had very good conception how things could be built. And so it was something he wanted to do. He had friends, he had hobbies, and yet some things happened kind of all at once that impacted the way he saw his future. Mm. And I think he just gave up in despair and thought, why go on?
Right.
And so my husband and I did not see this coming. We completely caught off guard, and it broke our hearts, devastated us. My son was my husband's best friend.
Yeah.
My husband found him. Like I said, my husband was 35 years in the military, and he had served in Afghanistan. He'd been in Iraq. Finding our son with a bullet hole in his head was the worst thing that ever happened to my husband.
Yeah, I can't even imagine how hard that would be to see something like that. You mentioned in your book here about that. Obviously, you talk about those things, and so your husband finds your son. Again, you didn't see this coming, and I think a lot of parents who have gone through this probably would say the same thing in the moment. We didn't think it would go that route, or go that far. So as your husband finds him, I think you were at work.
Right. I was teaching a class.
Yeah, you were teaching a class. That's
yes.
Yeah. And so to walk us through that, because I know you received some news while you were working there, and you were just kind of like, couldn't, like in denial almost, right?
And this is another thing that kind of came to me, as you reflect back on incidences. Because of my father's mental illness, he had created in all of the children, all my siblings were the same way, this emotional detachment. And I have had to really work to overcome that, to be able to emotionally attach to people. I mean, even married to my husband now, many years, sometimes, there are things he can do and I just will turn off a switch, like we're done,
Right, yeah.
And I've had to work on that and realize that, once again, that's not normal, right? That to escalate from 0 to 100 just so fast.
Right.
And so when the policeman came in to me and I was teaching the class, he asked for me, we went to the back room and he said, "I'm here to tell you that your son is dead." And I didn't react. I completely shut down. My mind was like, no, I'm denial. That's not possible. I saw him, just yesterday morning when he went to school and he came home late, so I didn't see him. And then I left early and I didn't, check on him. And he just was telling me, no, I'm thinking, well, was he in a car accident? Because I had no idea. And then he said, no, he shot himself at home. And I was just, that's not possible. And I didn't cry for a week. I just shut it off.
Yeah. I've heard, because I've been in this business, that happens often where people just shut it off. It's like it's too hard to even think or comprehend something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you hear this, it was interesting also what I read in your book about what was kind of going on before that, like that day, I think, where you said the irony of suicide is even though that people feel worse during the winter months, the majority of them don't take their life until the spring when they start to feel better. In retrospect, I think Christian had a plan back in the back of his mind when things got too hard. He had already decided he was going to be done.
Yes.
And that, and at that day, he also was like, he got his chores done. He was neat and tidy, everything, stuff, and you're thinking, but that was another sign of that you talk about in your book.
That's what I've heard. Of course, even though my father died by suicide, it wasn't something that I really took on. I didn't even talk about my father's suicide. My best friends didn't know how he died.
Really? Okay.
Because of the shame and stigma, so much around that. And this January, 2021 will be 7 years since his death. And so I had sort of stuffed all of that down. And then with my son's death, I started really exploring suicide and what happens. And the night before, I had gone to bed. My husband was up. Because of PTSD and all of that, he has a hard time sleeping. So he was up. My son came home about 11 o'clock at night. And my husband, of course, feels like that's the prime time to have a parent-child discussion. Okay, I will tell you right now, at nighttime, everybody's tired. It's not the prime time, right?
It's not prime time, yeah.
And this is a hard thing. It's where parents want to push their child to do better, and yet at what point have you pushed them too hard? And that's a fine line. It is really hard. My son had been in a car accident 2 weeks prior. He was going to have to come out of pocket with a deductible, which he had in his bank account. It's just, $500 is a lot for a 19-year-old.
For sure, yeah.
And then he finally admitted to my husband that night that his grades had been slipping a little bit. He was getting, B's and C's. It was getting harder. And then just the fact that my husband was kind of saying, you've got to do better, you've got to do this and this. They were very close. And I think that he just felt he had disappointed his father.
Yeah.
he went, did all his chores, took the trash out, put the hand wash dishes away,
Yeah.
which are his 2 chores. And so ironically, that next morning when I got up, I noticed that his chores were done, which
Yeah.
kind of shocked me. And I'm like, oh, thank you, son. I'm thinking to myself, not that I saw him, but thank you.
Right. You're just
And,
thinking that. Yeah.
and I left for my class, just feeling very good towards my son. My son then, my husband went to bed, and then my son went and changed into one of his favorite suits. And he did not go to bed. He ended up shooting himself that night. And like I said, I didn't know until the next morning. And my husband usually hears my son get ready, and he didn't hear him get ready. So he went up to check, and that's when he found him.
That's when he found him.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. There's, you mentioned some of these signs that you're seeing, and obviously it's, now you can look back and go, okay, this was going on. This was going on. What was there any other signs besides the ones you mentioned that you now noticed?
There was a couple things. One is that he and my husband would wrestle a lot, right? And as my son got older, and my husband was injured from Afghanistan, and he's getting older and he's hurting. Yeah. My son, and I noticed this just within the last couple weeks before his death, he was getting more aggressive with my husband in kind of a horseplay way, but to the point where he was actually hurting my husband. And my husband would say, Christian, too much, too much, too much. And he was having to repeat this. And I kind of stepped in and I said, son, you're really hurting your father. But it was more aggression than I'd seen in him before, right? Towards his father, who was his best friend.
Sure, yeah.
The other thing that I want to bring up was 3.5 years prior to his death, when he was 15 turning 16, he was a sophomore, just barely starting his sophomore year. Once again, out on the front porch, father and son, parental conversation, son, you really got to keep your grades up this year if you want to get into college and do the things you want to do. And you need to do X, Y, Z, and, toe the line type conversations, right? Yeah. Which we parents often have.
Yep. Yeah,
and he noticed my son was detaching emotionally, physically. He could see him detaching from the conversation. My husband's had training in suicide because of the military.
Yeah.
He had the presence of mind to ask my son, are you thinking of suicide? Those are hard words, but he said that.
That's a scary question because you don't want the answer, maybe, right?
Right, but you need to ask that. You don't say, "Are you thinking of hurting yourself?" Because they're already hurting. They're not thinking that they're going to hurt themselves some more. They're going to end the pain. So, are you thinking of suicide? And my son said yes. So that's a hard conversation, but both of them could be honest.
Yeah.
My husband immediately walked into the house. He said, "Christian's feeling suicidal. Please go sit with him and talk to him. I'm going to call the military hotline for suicide and get an appointment." So this was Sunday evening. Got him in to see the therapist the next day. And so I kind of talked to my son. I'm like, "Are you feeling suicidal?" And once again, like sort of in denial.
Yeah, right.
Because, well, I think most people crosses their mind, "Oh, life's too hard. I just want to be done." What most people don't do is come up with a plan. And my son had come up with a plan.
Okay.
And that's what makes it a little bit scarier, right? Is when they've actually thought through the process. So I took him to the therapist the next day. He's in there for an hour. I'm sitting outside, and finally they call me in, and the therapist says to my son, "Do you want to tell your mom, or should I?" And my son said, "Well, I'll tell her." And I'm all curious. I can't wait to hear this one.
This? Yeah.
And he said, "Mom, I don't believe in God. I believe in science." And I sort of looked at him like, okay. I said, "Son, I believe God is science, but I can't make you believe anything. So that's fine. Whatever you believe, right?" The sad part for me was that he looked at me like he expected me to become angry.
Like to be mad.
Yes. Yeah. And I really hurt about that because I thought, at what point have I pushed or gotten so far down the road that my son can't have an honest conversation with me, or he thinks that I'm going to kick him out of the house or whatever. And that's one of the lessons as I look back to say, as parents, we need to be prepared for when our kids come in and say, "Mom, I got my girlfriend pregnant," or "Mom, I'm gay," or "Mom, I don't believe in God. I know you do, but I don't."
Yeah.
What are we going to do? And quite honestly, if one of my daughters had come in as a young teenager or whatever and said, "Mom, I'm pregnant," I might have reacted a lot differently than I would today.
Yeah.
And I feel that we as parents, we cannot parent like we used to be parented, or that we were parented.
Yeah.
Life has changed. There are so many pressures on children, especially right now with COVID.
Yes.
It's huge, and we do not understand everything they're going through. And my plea to parents is understand where they are, take an interest in what they're doing, step back a little bit. It doesn't matter if your child isn't, the seat number one in the violin orchestra, or that they're number one on the football team, or whatever else. They just need to know that you love them no matter what.
Yeah. And I'm so glad you said that, Lark, that we need to parent differently, because you nailed it right on the head that, you got COVID going on. We just had a presidential election. We, the riots and the economy and everything that's going on right now. I've been doing this for 30 years. I've never had more clients this year who have felt or even thought of and planned out a suicide. I mean, I haven't seen this many in 30 years. Yeah.
It's really scary. I call it an epidemic. It's the number one killer of youth in Utah. It's the number two killer nationwide. And even though my father died by suicide, which increased the chances of another family member dying by suicide, increased them by 50%. Once again, I didn't know this.
I didn't know that either. Wow.
Even though the high school 2 cities over was having a rash of suicides, my thought as a parent in my home was, oh, that won't happen here. Won't happen to my kids. My kids are different. They know we love them. They know that they're protected. Everything's fine.
Yeah.
And it wasn't fine. And that's why I'm telling parents, you do not want to walk this road.
Right. So do you think it's important then, based on what you're saying, is to sit down with your kids and even ask that tough question?
Yes.
Hey, are you suicidal? Have you ever thought of it? Where are you? Have you been depressed to the point where you've thought of that?
Yes, because this is what I didn't know until later. My son went to about 2 months of therapy, and then he said, Mom, I'm good. I got this. And I said, great, son, good job. No worries. I never had another mental wellness checkup with him between the 3 years between when he said, Mom, I'm good, and his death. And that is my biggest regret. I watched, but I couldn't see any outward signs.
Yeah.
But unbeknownst to me, as I write in the epilogue in my book, I got an email from one of his friends who said, Christian and I would share. And for 2 years, he told me how he was depressed, how he struggled, and how he thought about suicide. She goes, I thought about telling you, but I didn't think it was that serious. And my heart breaks because it was that serious.
Yeah. Well, I think too, like friends might even be nervous to go tell the parent, like, hey, I'm thinking that your son might be suicidal, or, I mean, that's again, scary for someone to come to a parent, someone else's parents.
You know
to
what?
say
I will
that,
tell you that this happened and just kind of triggered me. Back when my younger daughter was about 15 and needed to have her phone taken away, one of those situations.
Yeah, sure.
I went through her messages, and she was very close to a boy, just very close as friends, not boyfriend, girlfriend, just friends.
Right.
And the boy had mentioned in his text to her that he was feeling suicidal. And I saw that. And I said, oh my goodness, I have 2 choices here. 1, I can look away, or 2, I can contact his parents. It's hard. It was hard, right? But I thought, if I were this child's parents, I would want to know.
Yeah.
And I reached out to the parents and I said, I'm a little bit embarrassed to be contacting you about this, but I feel like you should know. Your son is feeling suicidal. And the parents were completely shocked. They had no idea, right? Well, find out a little bit later, the boy was feeling the gay tendencies, and he couldn't tell his parents, and he was feeling very strange and awkward at school and all of these things, right?
Yeah.
And so since then, he's come out and he's very open about it, but it was kind of a shock for his parents. What's the choice there for those parents? To shun or close out that child, or get to the point where the child dies by suicide, or just say, I love you no matter what?
Yeah. Choking me up.
It's okay. I shed a lot of tears, and I never know, like I told you earlier, who's going to show up to the interview.
Yeah, same here. So I sit here. Thank you for being so vulnerable right now. You talked about in your book the shame and stigma around this.
Yes.
And you even said it in the beginning that you didn't even tell anyone about your own father's suicide. Why do you think there's such a stigma around it, and how do we break through that?
It seems like it's a weakness, or, if somebody's hurt physically, or they have cancer or something, it's not necessarily their fault, but
Yeah.
a lot of us who have never felt the effects of depression, we cannot understand where these people are coming from. And I've actually felt depression to the point where, okay, I want to end things.
Right.
Not that I came up with a plan, but I was in a dark hole. And this is what I try to explain to people who have not felt this. If you gash your arm open and you've got to go to the doctor and he's got to stitch it up and you get some pain medication, etc., at some point it's going to get better and it will heal. But when you are feeling depressed and you have a hole in your chest and you don't know how it's going to get better or if it will ever get better, and it hurts, like it's a physical pain, it hurts, just as if you had gashed your arm open. And for people who haven't felt that, they're looking at it and saying, oh, think positive, or let's be happy today. That doesn't work.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So I love that you wrote this book, because I think this is part of getting rid of that stigma, right? This book. And what I love about your book, you're real and you're raw, and you're not afraid to talk about where you went wrong.
Yes.
And I love that vulnerability. And so talk about how did you come to that point where you're like, okay, this has happened. I've got to accept what's happened. And I also got to look at my own self and where could I have been better and done. How did you get to that point?
So the first couple days after my son's death, I wanted to just sink in, stay in bed, just sink into myself. And I actually went into 5 months depression when my father died. And I felt myself going into that depression with my son. I felt it. And I could so easily have gone down that black hole. Two things happened. One, I saw my other kids and my husband. They were struggling. And we had to have some hard conversations about where they were with their mental wellness at that point.
Yeah, I can
It was
imagine.
pretty scary.
Sure.
And I realized that I didn't have the luxury of 5 months, 5 days, 5 weeks, 5 decades to go into a hole, because they might not be there when I came out.
Right.
And the second thing that happened was I had 3 moms reach out to me, and they had teenagers who were Christian's age that knew Christian. And the moms explained how their children had been struggling. One's child had attempted suicide the year before, unsuccessfully. The other one, was considering, very close.
Right.
And these mothers are just walking on eggshells. And their hearts are breaking. And I started to realize that this situation, it's not about me. It's not about how I failed as a parent, how I failed my son. It wasn't about what my son was going through, his struggles. And I couldn't change whether or not these other kids chose to end their lives by suicide. But what could I do? I could do one thing, and that's whether or not I chose to speak out.
Right.
And within just a couple days after those phone calls, I started posting on social media. I started sharing, my son died by suicide. This is what's happening. Parents, wake up. And suddenly, my whole life changed. I had this life mission that is dictating almost everything I do right now.
Right. Wow. Well, and it's interesting that people are reaching out to you as well, and obviously they're hurting. And I think a lot of parents are like that, where one, I don't want to talk about it because it's scary, but two, what do I even say and how do we even handle this?
Right. And there's so many things you can do. You don't have to just, ambush them and say, hey, I heard this podcast. Are you thinking of suicide? Right.
Right.
So let's say, like, when your kids come home from school or you see them during the day, right? What's the best thing that happened to you today?
Yeah.
Get them to talk to you. Oh, what's the worst thing that happened to you?
Yeah.
Because what you're trying to avoid is emotional flatlining. Once you've separated yourselves from your emotions, then it's very easy to separate yourself physically from this world.
Right.
We detach emotionally, and then we detach physically.
Wow.
And so engage with your children in these conversations. Help them to see the highs and the lows. Help them say, what's your biggest struggle right now? I mean, what's the heaviest thing? What's going on? What's happening? And take the time. This is not while you're listening to a podcast and trying to multitask or, all the things that we're trying to do. Yes, we're busy. But I can promise you, if you don't get your relationships right with your children, nothing else will matter.
Wow. So well said. Thank you. It hit me. One of the things that I've tried to teach my clients who have children is to challenge them to take each one of their children, no matter how many they have, on an individual date at least once a month.
Yes.
And again, like you said, cultivating that relationship so that when you do ask the hard questions, it's not some like, where's this coming from? Why are you talking to me now?
Right.
Like you said, we're multitasking. We got the podcast going. Hey, I need to talk to you real quick. No, you've got to massage the relationship. And that way you can ask these difficult questions,
Yes.
and they're going to be more open
Yes.
to telling you about that. I want to read another part of your book
Okay.
here. And it's about when you kind of started to change to take your power back. You said, on Tuesday, only 6 days after my son's passing, I was finally ready to tell the world how he had died. I had made a decision that while I could not change the past, I would do all in my power to change the future. I would find meaning in this tragedy and a reason to move forward in life rather than choosing to shrink back. The dark hole started to recede, and the very rocky journey began. It didn't make the loss easier, but it did make it more manageable. Sharing my message of value and hope became my reason for getting out of bed.
Yes.
And so that's 6 days after where you have this kind of, lack of a better way of saying it, change of heart
Yes.
around this whole thing. And it's kind of been your life's mission since then, right?
Yes.
And obviously I know it's still probably very, very difficult for you to...
There are some days that are harder, especially, my son's birthday was in October. Then you have Thanksgiving in November and Christmas, coming up.
For
and
sure.
when it's always there, subconsciously, it's always there, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, you made it very clear, very specific. You want to help 100,000 people choose to stay on this planet.
Yes.
How are you going to do that? Like, in your mind, what's that look like?
So I'll tell you how I came up with that first.
Okay.
So my son died March 2019, and I have this great idea. Okay, I'm going to be on people's podcasts. I'm going to share the message, which is part of what I'm doing.
Sure.
Eventually came up with the idea, okay, write a book. Still kind of struggled with writing the book. I'd pick it up for a month and then I'd put it down, and which is why it took me so long, just because it was so emotional.
Yeah.
And then January of this year, January 2020, early January, before like the world went crazy, right?
Right.
I'm thinking, I'm still struggling, like what is my why? Okay, my mission, but sometimes it was really heavy. And so I was in this business class and we were doing a meditation. And they said, think of the end of your life. What do you want to see? My husband's from New Orleans, LSU fan, rabid fan.
Yeah.
I know more about LSU
I
than
bet.
any human should know. Their stadium holds just over 100,000 people. And in this meditation, I saw myself standing on a stage at LSU Stadium filled with people, 100,000 people. And they're walking across the stage. And they're saying, thank you for sharing your message, because what you said helped me decide to stay on this planet. And I realized once again, it's not about me. It's about these people, because if I can touch one person's life and they can touch 2 people's lives and 4 people, and it just spreads from there. We need to stay on this planet. We are so interconnected with each other, and we need each other so much more than I ever imagined.
Right.
And if one person can stick around and stay so that they can help another person down the road, even when it's hard for them right now, but down the road in a few years, they're there for someone else to say, I know what it's like. I was in a hard place like you are, but I decided to make it through, and I know you can too. And that's what I've been doing, is just like sharing my message and getting it out there. And now I want to move more into the corporate world, which is where I'm familiar with.
Yeah,
because
sure.
there's so much depression going on there. I went through what's called professional grief, where with my father's death, I would go to meetings, I would take notes. And 2 days later, I'm looking at those notes and I would say, I don't remember being in the meeting. I don't remember what I'm supposed to do with these notes. That's my handwriting, but I don't remember anything. Yeah.
Wow.
And then, for example, what happens when someone is feeling this grief and you have an employee that comes in and they've lost someone or their child is terminally ill? How do you motivate them?
Right.
Because there's pretty much everything that motivated them in the past is completely changed.
Right.
How do you allow them grace to perform their job? Maybe not at the point that you would want them to or the level, but to allow them some time to come to terms with this.
Yeah. Wow. Well, again, out of tragedy comes this blessing in the sense that you are going to help so many people. I mean, I'm sitting here listening to you. You got such a great energy about you.
Thank you.
And I can feel your passion. I'm sure everyone listening to this can feel it as well. I mean, just, even reading your book, it grabbed me from the beginning. It was like, whoa,
I was kind of mean at the beginning,
yes,
wasn't I?
I was like going, wow, this woman ain't afraid, is she? You get right after it.
I do. You know what? And I just, it's one of these books where it's either going to grab you and you can't put it down, or you're going to start and you're not going to even be able to read the first page.
Right.
Right. It's one of those either or.
Yeah. No, but I'm glad. I think it's important that you are like that because, again, this is serious.
This is real. This
is real.
This is not just, it's happening out there. With the statistics of suicide, if you have not been impacted by suicide, you will be. It's that prevalent. We talk about COVID and how, I know somebody who died, or I know people who get it and blah, blah, blah. Okay, suicide is not that far behind.
Right.
Those statistics. It is scary.
Wow. Yeah, that is scary to hear it like that. So if we have some families or an individual listening to this right now who are thinking of suicide, what is something, you've shared some amazing things already, but what's something you could share to them right now? What, if you had to speak to their soul right now, what would you tell them?
I would tell them that there is hope and there is help. And it might take a little while to find the right things that are going to help you. If it's medication, it's okay. If it helps you live and function in a way that you are happy and can get out of bed, that's fine.
Right.
If it's finding some tools, some meditation, some exercise, spending time with family and friends. That's part of why this whole COVID isolation is increasing the numbers of suicide, because people are feeling fearful. They're uncertain about their future, but they also, they're isolated. And speaking from experience, both from myself and from watching my father, when you're in a depression, you think the answer is to be alone and be away from people. When in reality, it's the opposite. It's to be with people to help you feel connected and to feel loved.
Yeah.
And so as much as possible, even with quarantines and lockdowns, all of this, Zoom, at least, at least you can see somebody, right?
Right.
FaceTime, all of that. Connect, reach out to people and find somebody that you trust and can share with what's going on. In Utah, we have the Safe UT app, which is wonderful. You can reach out there. And even if you know that your friend is having suicide ideation, you can reach out and ask for help. And this is anonymous.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that. I had a 12-year-old girl, she's one of my clients, just this week. She came to a session and she told me one of her schoolmates, same age, 12 years old, reached out to her and said, I'm thinking of ending my life. And she went to the
Safe
UT app and reached out to them, and they contacted this kid, went to this kid's house, sat with him for a couple hours, talking him through this. And he sent her a text after the meeting and said, thank you so much.
Yes.
That's exactly what I needed.
Yep. Because we don't want to interfere or get involved maybe, but if you can save this person's life.
Yes.
We often look at mental illness or this suicide as, now they're going to hell. They've done the worst thing possible. My belief is that people who take their lives are not in their right minds. They have crossed that barrier, that that sort of self-preservation. They've crossed the barrier, and they are taking their life because they're in so much pain. And we should have compassion on them, not condemn them, and say, what was it that was so bad that they felt this was the way they could, overcome this or move forward. And so many people who die by suicide, I think of my father, probably my son. They think in their minds that they are a burden to their families. They are not a burden. And so parents, make sure you are talking to your children. Do not ever let them feel that they are a burden or that you would be better off without them.
Right. And I think a lot of times as parents, we assume we're not doing that, right? We just assume I'm not doing that with my kids. But I think, like you said earlier, that's why it's so important that we have those conversations. So we can actually, that might even be a question to ask. Do you feel like, do I make you feel like you're a burden to our family? That's a tough question too.
And I mentioned in there that 2 weeks before my son's death, I had a dinner with him, just the two of us. And I said, what do you think that mom did bad? What could I have done better? What rules do you want to change in the family? Give me some feedback. And I had to sit there and listen to, your child telling you how you could have done a better job.
Where you could be better.
And not doing it so that I can jump on him or justify myself or any of that, but just to listen and hear what he's saying.
Yeah. Well, again, you're trying to connect.
Yes.
Right? And I love that you said that. I think connection is so critical. I saw a quote once, and I can't remember who said it, so I apologize, but it says, we're never more fully alive than when we're connected.
Yes.
And so I think that's a really good message that you shared, and I really do appreciate that advice. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah. So if someone wants to get their hands on this book, which they need to, even if I just think every parent should read this.
Right. I've had a 25-year-old friend who read it. She's never dealt with, any suicide issues in her family. She doesn't even have kids. And she said, this book changed me, because it can help us just look at life differently and say, what am I doing that maybe I shouldn't be doing? How can I be more empathetic with people around me? How can I just reach out in love and understanding?
Right.
So the book is on Amazon, or you can find it on my website, larkdeangalley.com.
Okay. And what other, programs do you offer? I know you do a whole bunch of things.
Right. Well, as I'm out there talking to parents about, you need to be aware about this. And then they'd come back to me and say, I'm aware. What can I do now? And I'm like, oh, let me think. So I actually have a resources tab on my website so people can go there. I would say that first and foremost, get help, either for yourself or if as a parent you need to improve your parenting skills, getting your own help. It is not a weakness to reach out and ask for help to make you better. And one of the things that was really difficult for me is when my son passed away, I just felt this overwhelming sense that he hated me, he didn't love me, that I had failed him. And my older daughter pointed out, she goes, Mom, you were always trying to help him. And I thought she's right. I had just finished a book about parenting that had allowed me to have that dinner conversation with my son.
For sure.
Back at Christmas, just 3 months prior to his death, I had been taking a one-on-one counseling session with a parental counselor to help me make it through Christmas with my son.
Yeah.
And I realized I never gave up on him.
Wow. Well, you received a really sacred message from your son.
I did.
Do you feel comfortable sharing that?
Yes, I do. The week after he died, like I mentioned, I was really feeling depressed and just felt like I'd failed him. The week after he died, 3 different people came to me and said, I have a message for you from your son. And I'm like, okay, Twilight Zone, right?
Yeah, right. You're like, excuse me?
And I'm a little bit leery because,
Sure.
you hear about people trying to capitalize on other people's grief or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, okay, I think I will know if this is from my son or not. And they said exactly what I needed to hear. They said, your son wants me to tell you that he loves you. Tell my mom that I love her, is what he said 3 times to me from 3 different people. And the third one, who was my aunt at the funeral, she said, Christian said to tell you that he loves you and that he finally understands. So this was just barely a week after his death. And that he finally understands was kind of a key thing for me.
Yeah.
Because when I would rage in my head about all the things that I was dealing with my son, and trying to parent the best way that I knew how, and him pushing back.
Sure.
And I believe that when we die, that we'll, stand before our maker and kind of have to look at all of our actions and how they affected other people.
Yeah.
And I would say to myself, someday you're going to understand how your actions and your words impacted me and how much they hurt me. So when he said, tell my mom that I love her and that I finally understand, I knew that he knew.
Wow.
That I had done the very best I could because I loved him and I wanted the best for him.
Yeah. Wow, what a sacred and precious message.
And I feel that as I share his story, I feel him with me. I'm actually closer to my son now than before his death.
I believe that, and I get chills to even think about it. I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that's why he's there supporting you, pushing you along this road and this mission that you're on to, have 100,000 people say, I'm here. I want to stay on this planet. I'm not leaving because of your message. I mean, that's amazing. And I do believe that.
Yes.
I really do. I want to ask you another question. What's the best thing that's happened to you today?
Just a couple things. First of all, the opportunity to connect with my daughter earlier. She's in college. She still lives at home. So it's the younger daughter.
Sure.
But and she's 20. She's old enough to kind of come and go as she wants.
Yeah.
But as a parent, I still want to know where she is a little bit.
Sure, yeah.
Of course, we have phone trackers. I
Yeah.
mean, just because you're 20, you still live at home, right? you get tracked.
Yeah.
And this morning I got up and I realized that she had not come home. She had stayed at a friend's house, but she didn't tell me that she was staying away, and just as out of courtesy, so I don't have to worry. And, I wanted to initially shoot off a text like, we told you, and this is the, what I asked you. This is too much to ask. I didn't say that. I simply said, remember that if you're going to stay away, just remember to send me a text so that I don't worry about you.
Right.
And she said, sorry, Mom. And I look at that and I'm like, I had a choice this morning, right?
You did.
And I chose to make sure I didn't react in anger, but to just remind her like, hey, I'm concerned about you. And so she felt that concern instead of the anger. And I guess that's a happy thing for me.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you. Well, I can't thank you enough, Lark, for being here today and sharing your message and being vulnerable with us. And again, this is a tough subject to talk about, but I'm so grateful we got people like you who are willing to talk about it. It's so needed. We need people like you to help champion, to save lives and I think this book needs to get in everyone's hand. It's learning to breathe again. LarkDeanGalley.com is the place to find everything that you do, and they can have a link to the book and all that.
Yes.
And if you have a question for Lark, I challenge our listeners, please reach out to her. If it's okay.
Yeah. No, and my email's on the website.
Okay. Well, here I am like, hey, everyone talking. You're like, hey, Todd, whoa. But, if you feel like you have a son or a daughter or a friend, or if you are struggling and having thoughts of suicide, please reach out, get the help, but reach out to Lark and ask her a question. And I'm sure she'll, if she doesn't have the answers, she'll lead you and guide you to the people that do. And so I challenge our listeners to do that. But again, thank you so much for taking the time today to be here with us.
It means the world to me to share this message that everyone has value. They are needed. There might be days that are hard. Stay in the game.
Right. Stay in the game. I love it. Let's help Lark achieve that goal of saving 100,000 people. And I will do everything I can to continue to help support you. And I'm so grateful that I get to know you now. And
thank you.
Yeah, I really, this has been a blessing for me too. And the feeling in this room has been amazing. I hope the listeners can feel this, as they listen to these words, that there's something about this.
Yes.
And that's no accident, by the way.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Lark. You're amazing. Please reach out to her, you guys. And thank you so much for listening. I love you as well. And this is just, I can't even believe I get to do these kind of things. And I just feel very fortunate to be a part of all of this. And thank you, listeners. I love you so much. Lark. I wish you the best in everything that you're doing.